Welcome to Fireside Giants, a featured podcast by Empire Sports Media. I'm your host, Alexander Wilson, and my co-host, Anthony Rivardo. Give us a follow on Twitter if you haven't already, Alex Wilson ESM, Anthony_Rivardo. Make sure to smash that subscribe button on YouTube and leave a review on iTunes if you enjoy the show. Today, we have a special guest on the line, Willie Receipts, back at it, and we're going to be jumping into some awesome topics, including comparing players to Game of Thrones characters. If you watch Game of Thrones, you know how fantastic the series is and how much information there is to actually compare players to. Will knows too much about this, and that's why I'm excited, because he's going to whip up some of the most insane comparisons, and I'm pretty excited for it. But how are you doing today, Will?
I'm doing well. It's been a difficult few days for Giants fans. I'm certainly upset about DeAndre Baker's predicament. Obviously, that's no fun for anybody, especially just personally. My lucky number is 27, so I always have high hopes for whoever's wearing that jersey. I know there are several Giants fans who are upset about certain Madden ratings, and I'm looking forward to discussing that with you guys. But all things considered, it's a beautiful day, and so I can't really complain.
Love to hear it. How you doing, Anthony?
I'm chilling, man. I got back from the gym a little while ago. I'm a little tired, but just trying to get by with this whole quarantine thing. Hopefully it ends soon. I go back to school in a little under a month, so trying to get excited for that.
Yeah, man. Well, I saw you with the wife beater on YouTube. If you haven't seen it yet, go check out Anthony. In next video, he's going to be doing a heavy Italian accent with some meatballs in the frame to really make it interesting for you guys.
I was just lounging, man. Just lounging.
I respect it. Got to show off the guns when you're going to the gym so much.
For sure.
But no, back to DeAndre Baker. I want to just get this out of the way before we really dive into the bread and butter of this episode. Baker's situation has been taking turns left and right the past few weeks, and the latest one is the New York Daily News. Pat Leonard came out with a story. I guess we can call it factual. I don't know. You guys can tell me what you think, because he's had some reports in the past that have been true and some that have been wrong. And then ESPN came out shortly after saying, his lawyer, which is he's paid to say, that they were aware of the blackmail situation going on and they were trying to stifle it and keep it under wraps. But they have Instagram messages between this guy, Dominic, and he was a witness. He saw them actually paying off the people that witnessed the armed robbery, per se, go down. And it was about $55,000 in cash. And they have messages from DeAndre Baker saying he's getting the cash right now and they'll meet him in the city. So what do you guys think about this? What do you think this is going for DeAndre Baker? And do you think he's a giant by next week?
Be a giant by next week? Possibly, but by training camp, I think they're going to need to get this figured out. I don't really want to say whether or not I believe it's true or not, because it's really, no one knows the truth except for DeAndre Baker and his attorneys. The attorney is, of course, paid to say what sounds the best for DeAndre Baker's legal situation. And he did rebuttal against this warrant by the New York Daily News, and he had a pretty good excuse for it. And I believe he even said that he has evidence that DeAndre Baker was in Fort Lauderdale that night and he wasn't even in Miami. So I don't know. There's just so much information that contradicts other information. I don't know what to make of it, but when you consider the fact that DeAndre Baker played pretty poorly last year and he also slept through meetings last year, and Joe Judge is trying to implement a very disciplined culture, I don't think that DeAndre Baker is going to be on this team this season. I really wish this never happened, that he would be, because I think this new defensive scheme was perfect for his playing style. But it looks like it's just going to be another sunk cost with another first-round draft pick who's going to have a very short career with the Giants. And hopefully we could find a replacement at some point.
So I'm wondering, as we're starting to talk about this, I'm having all these Game of Thrones flashbacks going through my head. And I'm wondering, what should be our policy with spoilers? I mean, I feel like, some of these episodes that came out 10 years ago, we be a little okay with giving up some plot details, or,
I think we should give it all away.
Yeah, give it all away, but
spoilers, but
right. I'd say give it all away, but just say spoiler alert and then skip 10 seconds.
Yeah, it's 10 years old. If you haven't seen it, that's your fault.
It's an old show.
That's fair. I think, there are a ton of thoughts that I'm sure we all have. I mean, obviously, Baker has not worked out up to this point the way that the Giants expected him to. I think anyone would be able to say that. Nobody was suspecting the selection of Baker would get the defensive coordinator fired, even if we thought, other potential positional shortcomings could get there. Obviously, there were locker room issues last year, clearly, and this legal issue takes everything out of the water. It's a really difficult position. I am going to come right out and say it. I mean, I feel like this is, not really the most professional thing for me to say, but I do not respect Pat Leonard as a journalist. I do not think that he is concerned with accurately characterizing what's happening for his audience. I think he has, for years, wanted to make himself the center of a story, tried to be smarter than the rest of the world, and basically take, go out taking some limbs, and when they come back, he pats himself on the back. I mean, I called him out.
That's punny.
Oh, I see what you did there. That was unintentional. Wow. A few months ago, he was talking about how he's been advocating for a Giants rebuild for years. That wasn't true. When Nate Solder signed with the Giants, he said that Solder was, exactly what the Giants had been missing, and that, it's you can't have your cake and eat it too. He was right. He was banging the Odell trade was going to happen down our throats until it was basically until it was a forced issue. I mean, I do think that the Odell trade was very you should have been able to see it coming, given the fact that he was so talented. He could help a team for right now, and the Giants were finally understanding that they weren't a winning in 2019 team. Obviously, it was pretty clear that he wasn't happy and that the offense wasn't functional and that a change of scenery was necessary for some parties involved. But Pat is not the guy who, if Art Stapleton or if Dan Duggan says something, even, there's some other reporters that I don't necessarily like as much. If they say something, I'm going to listen and take it seriously. Pat wants to be first. He doesn't necessarily want to be right. And I think that needs to be considered whenever he's saying or making a report, and the rest of Giants, the Giants media Twitter isn't necessarily jumping in on that. All that being said, I mean, it doesn't look good for DeAndre. Quentin Dunbar, who is the other party in this scheme, has to replace his attorneys. One thing that was really weird was that DeAndre Baker's attorney called him Andre Baker, not once but twice in his response to Pat, which, I can't imagine. First of all, why would you be having this, fighting this out on Twitter? Why would you be, if he's actually, I think they're looking for like a social media win. They're not looking for, just to be cleared in a court of law. Clearly, the fact that he hasn't joined the team says something. I think I'd be very surprised if DeAndre Baker plays another down for the Giants. I'm not ready to write him off. I do strongly believe in innocent until proven guilty and letting the legal system run its course. But it's a real uphill battle right now, and I don't see it shaking out in our favor.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right. And, just a quick sidetrack. The ice cream truck is outside my house for the past 10 minutes now. I'm trying to close every window. Do you guys get the ice cream truck that that rolls by during the summer? Do you guys have that?
Not down here in Florida. I know when I lived on Long Island, it would come by, and that was always exciting, but not anymore.
I had it a little more in New York than I do at my folks' house in the suburbs. But yeah, I in New York, I'm usually next to a lot of ambulances because I'm right near a couple hospitals.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear it right now, but
yeah,
he is banging the drum right now outside my house. There's no one out there. He's not selling creamsicles to 40 people. He's just hanging outside my house with ice cream truck music blasting. He's really trying to disrupt my DeAndre Baker thoughts, which is really what I'm trying to get to right now. And probably good for him because I could use some ice cream after, having to write about DeAndre Baker's legal issues constantly and the twists and turns. And for a second, he's innocent. For another second, he is the most guilty person on the planet. And they have text messages, physical evidence of this stuff going on. And that's what blows my mind. How are you, the lawyers, allowing physical evidence to be present after the fact? They literally have messages as far as we know. Let's just say that there are text messages as far as we know, and Pat Leonard somehow managed to get a search warrant and actually get this information. How do your lawyers let you talk on Instagram direct messages and literally admit to paying off these witnesses? That is probably the worst lawyer work. I wouldn't even pay them if this happened and they didn't actually monitor this entire situation correctly.
Well, that's my biggest question though, is how did Pat Leonard get a search warrant? How does that happen? I didn't know that media journalists could have search warrants. I thought that was police department has to have a search warrant. How did the New York Daily News obtain a search warrant?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think they had obtained the search warrant themselves. I'm sure he saw a copy or that or something like that. I don't know if he has a friend who who could be involved with the police department. But with response to Alex, I don't necessarily know how much water the argument of like I'm not going to pay you because you didn't stop me from doing this really stupid thing really holds. But with regards to the money, it could be a payoff. It could be a shakedown. It could be potential witnesses saying you don't want me to say these things, pay up this money. And if that's the case, there's probably something else that smells wrong, but who knows if if it can be proven in a court of law. The one thing that I do have to say though is between what happened with Jay Bromley a couple summers ago, what happened with Cam Moore last summer, I'm sure there are other cases that aren't necessarily coming to mind right now. Innocent until proven guilty does still mean something, even in the world of Twitter. And I think, we all owe it to, anybody to have, the right to be heard in a court of law. But I think, I think there are signs that don't look good, but we can't write it off until the story's over. It's important to get this right, not to necessarily be first.
I agree. It's going to take time. And with that being said, Baker doesn't have a lot of time to get this situated. He really should be at training camp in the next few weeks, and the preseason's rolling around in a month. Well, that's true. We don't really know what's going to happen. Let's just say that we predict. Honestly, it's the best time for him to be in a legal situation because ultimately, if the season gets pushed back a few weeks, he'll be okay, and he'll actually benefit from it. But the reality is, let's imagine that the season plays out as it will on a regular schedule, and Baker is not anywhere close to being done with these legal issues. And the Giants are like, you're not allowed back here until you figure out your stuff, because they don't want a player who's been, dealing with legal issues, and especially something of that magnitude. Like, we all remember the Josh Brown debacle, and that really left a stain on this organization. They kept him on a little too long after domestic violence charges were pressed against him. And when you have stuff like that happening, like, that's the image of your franchise. Like, it took a huge hit after that. People were really, really mad about it. And when you have someone who's just been, charged with armed robbery, offenses, that is a huge deal. And if I was the Giants, I would not even let him in the parking lot until he's figured this out. So they should be going forward imagining that he will not be a part of this team in 2020 and beyond, and they should be really focusing in on Sam Beal, Julian Love, Corey Ballantyne, these guys that need to take a step forward. Even Darnay Holmes, I know Anthony mentioned he could play outside corner. He should be competing at both slot and boundary.
And I'm also going to throw in Drayvon Askew-Henry, who the guy we picked up from the XFL, who's, I'd put him and Beal both as guys I didn't think were super likely to make the team, necessarily, a couple weeks ago. But now, who knows? They could be post every down players.
Yeah, and I just wrote about Askew-Henry's like an hour ago. I just posted an article about him. You want to know who his cousin is? But you can't guess.
I remember it from when he was first signed, but I remember seeing it when it was first signed, but I can't remember. Give me a clue.
He played for the Jets, right?
Yes, played for the Jets.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's his birthday today, I think. Revis?
Darrelle Revis.
Yeah.
His cousin's Darrelle Revis. So he has the football genetics.
That. I saw that like months ago. I can't believe I remembered that.
I'm so proud of you.
You're young. You're great.
Exactly. It's untainted knowledge and wisdom at this point. So too many claws will do that to you, man. Just watch out for those. They'll come for you. No, but Drayvon Askew-Henry is a decent player. He played well for the Guardians. He's been on New England. He spent time with Jacksonville and New England. So he's spent time in the NFL. He just hasn't been able to stick around, which, probably historically tells us that he won't be a premium level player for the Giants. He probably won't start. He might be a special teams guy, a depth piece, especially with DeAndre Baker's situation. Now, the question is, do the Giants go out and sign somebody to supplement the expectation that Baker might not be on the team this year? Do you think it's worth going out and getting a guy like Ross Cockrell, or even, considering Logan Ryan? I know he wants a little bit much, but maybe on a one-year deal, it's worth it just to hold it over. But again, what's the point of signing a guy on a one-year deal when you could just utilize that time to develop your youth players?
The only player in the cornerback market right now that I see worth it in terms of free agents is Logan Ryan. He's the only player that I would even want to pay, and I know he would be requiring over $10 million in his salary, but if you look at the rest of the market, it's slim pickings. At that point, you might as well just let your guys develop and play and see who on the roster can win that position. But if you're going to sign someone, I would pay up and I would get Logan Ryan. I think that he'd be a pretty good fit in the scheme. He's got familiarity with Joe Judge. And I definitely think that by the end of training camp preseason, we're going to have more salary cap space because we're going to cut players off the roster. But one cut that I put out in my last YouTube video, an idea is that if Nate Solder is playing poorly throughout training camp and preseason, they can cut him and free $10 million in cap space. And now that we have Andrew Thomas on the roster, we have Cameron Fleming, Nick Gates, and Matt Parrott who can all compete at right tackle. I would do it if he's not playing well. What's the point in having this $19 million salary on the books if he's playing and allowing 56 pressures like he did last season? So I think they could definitely free up some money there and invest that $10 million that they get from cutting Nate Solder into a $10 million salary for Logan Ryan. That makes sense in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's a fair opinion. Alternatively, I'd say offensive tackle is a bit more valuable than cornerback. So I would probably just keep Solder for the 1 year. The dead cap hit this year is so high, it's not really worth it to cut him just yet, because I think they only save about $6 million, and next year they'll save like $13 million.
They saved
or something.
$10 million this year because it's post
This
June
year?
1st. Yep, pre June
Okay,
1st it would have been $6 million. But I get what you're saying. Offensive tackle is more valuable, but to me, I just don't value Nate Solder. I don't think he's a good player. That's the difference.
At right tackle, I might value him more.
Maybe, but if they put him there in preseason, he's not playing that well, then I think why even drag him into the regular season and have him cripple our offensive line further?
That's a fair perspective, and that's the whole Andrew Thomas left tackle, right tackle debate. But that's a topic for another day, because that I could go for a while on. But Will, let's get started on the Game of Thrones segment of this show, and I want to give you the first crack at some of your funnier connections that you've made. I'm pretty excited to hear who you've mustered up in the past few days.
So, well, we this conversation basically started on Twitter. I think you guys and I think Chuck also from G-Men HQ were talking about some Game of Thrones parallels. And I think I chimed in right off the bat. Well, obviously Drew Brees is Mance Rayder, and I had the gif of him telling Jon Snow as a wildling, "We do not kneel," which it doesn't take too much to put that one together. And then I think you asked like who would be Ned Stark, and I was thinking, God, let's see who was in position to start taking over, ruling a kingdom that was plunging with debt, who really didn't know how the game was played, who wanted to make his boss look good, even though his boss wasn't necessarily making it as easy as possible, who for the most part did conduct himself with honor and did put the nation over his own reputation. I think the clear-cut answer with that was Pat Shurmur. I think Ned was a dead man as soon as he rode south to King's Landing, and I don't think that's necessarily too far off from Shurmur when he took over a team that was not quite as rebuilding as they really needed to be. The corollary there would be his boss as Robert Baratheon, the overweight guy who's kind of just in charge with feeling really self-secure, who taking over the throne was really important, but now that he's on the throne, he's having a little bit of trouble. That was Robert Baratheon. That was Dave Gettleman. Tomato. But as I was thinking over the last week, I also thought the other Dave Gettleman possibility was actually Qyburn. If you remember, Qyburn was the guy who was kicked out of the Citadel because he wanted to test the weird experiments, and he was he helped Jaime put his arm back on, and then he worked for Cersei. But he loves running these experiments on these people. He's really cruel to his test subjects. His test subjects are in agony kind of the whole time. I feel like that's like a dig of people don't really like playing for Dave Gettleman, So I kind of threw that in a little tongue in cheek, but I think I'm going to stick with the original Robert Baratheon. Do you remember what else we had really?
It's a good question. Well, I was thinking, Jaime Lannister, Arya Stark. I think we'll probably do a few new ones here. I was thinking before the show. who I could compare to, and I want to go with Arya Stark because Anthony had a different answer than I did
Okay.
here. I put Joe Judge as Arya Stark because Arya was kind of like infant in the beginning of the show, but she learned so much and she's gathering all this information. And by the end of the series, spoiler alert, she becomes such an influential piece and has so much power and so much knowledge, and she's really helping. And I think Joe Judge is in that state now. He's been learning and learning and learning. He was blinded, not really, but he was put in a position where he was learning every piece of the puzzle, and then eventually, he's developed now to a point where he can lead. Like he's now has power. So I think I see the correlation there, but I don't know. Anthony saw something else in that perspective.
I think mine's not nearly as well thought out. I was trying to find someone for Saquon, and I thought Arya Stark just because she's a beast and she can just slaughter everyone. I think she's pretty awesome. Will clearly disagrees with that one, but I also want to bring up my other one real quick. For Daenerys, I'm gonna go with Odell because at the beginning everyone loved Odell and they loved Daenerys and he was awesome. And then by the end of it, really public perception turned and a fire was lit. Obviously, Daenerys, spoiler alert, goes and burns down the whole city, and I think that's kind of metaphorical for what Odell did, or at least what the media and Odell combined did. I think Daenerys burning King's Landing is Odell sitting down with Lil Wayne and doing that interview. That's the moment where he kind of started the fire and started the downfall of that current Giants roster and Odell's career with the Giants. And then, of course, by the end of it, Daenerys dies, and that would be, to me, Odell getting traded away to the Browns to die. Like he said, Dave Gettleman traded him there to die. But I got to hear what Will's thinking here.
So if Daenerys if Odell's Daenerys, then is the kicking net Jon Snow, or is that like,
No, the kicking net would
That's
be.
a good question.
Who was her other boyfriend that she had?
Drogo?
No, the other
Drogo.
one, the one in between.
Dario.
Is that Dario?
Yeah.
That would be the kick at that.
So I actually said Dario to was a little bit of Odell because he was like kind of like following the beat of his own drum. He was like, I fight for, beauty, like he didn't really, necessarily, I do think he wanted to win more than anything, but he wasn't as like, loyal of a member of the Kingsguard as kind of, Sir Barristan and Jorah. I want to get back to Arya because originally I was thinking Arya was like Daniel Jones. I was thinking of the list on draft night, but I think I'm going to go with Alex's on that one because I like the Joe Judge, especially because Joe Judge is saying, we're going to be versatile. Whoever our opponent is, we're going to change our looks, and who changes their looks, spoiler alert, better than Arya by the end of the season.
That's good. That was good.
That's a big one.
So
props to that one.
As you were starting to say that, I was like, oh, versatility. I got it. So I think I'm gonna give you that one. I didn't have one for Saquon, but I will say I know we discussed this last week, but in terms of Daenerys's other lovers, I really like putting Khal Drogo as Nick Gates. The long-haired savage Gates, who he was undrafted, which is kind of like as Westerosi folks would say, uncivilized. With that wildling from another continent, but
Nebraska.
We're all big Nick Gates fans, and I feel like he's got the brute strength that can really make that one work.
Yeah,
I like that.
Absolutely.
I like that a lot.
I do like that. And here's an underrated character who I think has to have some like really weird connection. Peter Baelish, Littlefinger. Who does he match up with? Like kind of a creepy dude that just comes out of nowhere all the time. I feel like that's Mike Shula.
This is actually kind of funny because back at school, before the coronavirus pandemic hit, some of my friends in my common room on my dorm hall, we were watching Game of Thrones together because some of us have seen it, some of us haven't. So we would watch some episodes here and there with the guys who haven't. And we tried to make like comparisons to people and, basically parallels for people on the floor. And I ended up being Littlefinger, and make of that what you will. But I ended up being Littlefinger, and I was a little offended.
I would be offended by that. He's so creepy.
He was smart, though. He was a smart guy, but he was.
Oh no, he's sly.
He was always scheming.
He was always scheming. So like aside from the creepy part, like I could see the like you're savvy and you're thinking a little 5 steps ahead of everybody else. But his weakness, Sansa, super creepy on that
Yeah.
end. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know who's like behind the scenes. I guess they're the computer guys, like Peter Baelish, Littlefinger's kind of the computer guys. Like they're trying to get 5 steps ahead of everybody,
The
but
computer
no one
folk.
really trusts
So,
them.
so,
The
so
computer
the
folk.
issue
Nobody
with
really
the
trusts
issue
them
with
though.
Littlefinger though is that Littlefinger is the guy who's pretending to be your friend, but in reality he's really like screwing you over. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe we can say the Joe Douglas in this case, the Jets GM, because he's like, here, you want Leonard Williams? Ha, you have Leonard
That's
Williams now. But
That's a great correlation. That's
I didn't
great.
really I didn't really see like that there's a like a Littlefinger type character on the Giants. I will say that I'm really into like
Should be
Myers-Briggs personality test. If you ever tried something like that, it measures like 4 different personality traits, and then gives you a 16 options, 2 to the 4th. For describing your character. And both of my best friends from like a long time in my life, they both matched with Littlefinger on their Myers-Briggs personality test. I was hearing it, but I think that might make sense a little bit, with wanting to pay my debts to Dave Gettleman for. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much, but I didn't have a Littlefinger, but I did have a Mike Shula, so I will give you my Mike Shula. And I felt really good about this one. Mike Shula to me was Lord Edmure Tully, Catelyn Stark's brother, Hoster Tully's son, who, as you know, Mike Shula's father, who recently passed away, Don Shula, was one of the greatest NFL coaches of all time. And you could say that Mike Shula became a Lord really because of, who his father was. I mean, I think that there's some growth, and he really didn't bring all that much to the table. So I think, I think that there's a, there's something that's pretty satisfactory about that. I hated the Mike Shula hire from day one.
Me too.
I thought a guy who had moderate success with Cam Newton, expecting him to replicate that success with like a QB that is completely a different style QB, was asinine. And I don't think there's any point of the last 2 years that really made me think, wow, this Mike Shula guy has really proven me wrong. So I wasn't upset with finding a way to, as Sansa said in the last episode, "Uncle, please sit."
No, seriously, you're spot on with that, because Mike Shula really didn't do much, and I think it was more of like Gettleman saying, I'm just gonna hire my friend because I'm bored and I don't know anyone here. So it's like, I see what you're saying, and I agree. Also, Pat Sherman was just way over his head trying to call plays and design plays, and Mike Shula was kind of sitting in the back like, what am I
call
supposed
plays?
to
How about
do
calling
anyway?
timeouts?
See, that's even more important. God, the guy could not figure out time management for his life.
It was really sad. So I'm going to give you another one. Let's see. I will say, okay, this one's pretty easy, and there are 2 options. But Craster, the wildling with whom the Night's Watch stayed, who would marry all his daughters, etc. It's either Philip Rivers or Antonio Cromartie, right? For obvious reasons.
He has so many kids. Cromartie's like 14 kids, right? Something crazy.
Yeah, they both have a lot. I think Rivers has had them all with one woman, and Cromartie isn't quite as consistent. But so maybe Rivers is the better one. Rivers is a former Giant, so I'm happy to go with that one.
Yeah, there you go. You make the connection. But here's an interesting one. Samwell Tarly, I kind of see him as like Dalvin Tomlinson. They kind of just stay quiet. They do their thing. They're researching. Like Dalvin Tomlinson's super like, he's like a video gamer. He's into anime. Like he just kind of like sits behind the scenes and he's just studying, and like no one really calls his name. But when you need him, he's there. So that was my connection for Samwell Tarly.
That's good. I like that.
So I think I'm going to put Daniel Jones as Samwell Tarly. I think he's the guy that nobody really thought would be the answer. Everybody kind of gave him a really hard time when he arrived on the scene. I think that certainly fits. And I think that also fits because we were talking last week about how Eli last year was Dickon Tarly, his brother, who people were really excited about going into last year, and then he just kind of got burned up pretty quickly 2 games into the season. But and so the way that Samuel ended up taking back his lordship, I feel like I feel like that really fits. I think he's cerebral, and at the end of the day, he will be the guy who kills both the White Walker and the Thenn. So I'm looking forward.
That's good.
I'm really looking forward to Daniel Jones, and I was about a year ago at this time. I was viscerally against him, and that was more towards my lack of faith with Gettleman after the year before. But I'm really proud to root for, to have Daniel Jones as our quarterback, and hoping that he does really good things.
Yeah, yeah, and just to sidetrack a little bit on Daniel Jones, he added 9 pounds of healthy muscle mass to his frame, and I think that's going to be a huge part in his ball security and being more comfortable in the pocket. Shaking off those hits, having better awareness and more size and confidence, putting more velocity behind the football. He had a few throws last year on deep passes that just didn't get there. I think that extra weight, the drive in his legs is going to really help. I think we're going to see a totally different player than we did last year, and it's going to be for the better, just based on experience alone and offseason improvements and more weight, more size, better ball, security. All of these things together, we should see, theoretically, knock on wood, a big improvement for Daniel Jones in 2020.
I'm definitely excited by the fact that he's gotten bigger and stronger, but I don't really see it as correlation equals causation with the ball security, because when I look at his ball security issues, I see he has tunnel vision and he gets stuck looking down the field too long and he holds onto the ball too long and then gets hit. Now maybe
That's
it'll
experience.
help him, right, and maybe it'll help him hold on to the ball a little better if he's stronger, but I think that it's really just an awareness thing. So I'm excited because I just think he's already kind of a tank in the pocket. He gets hit and he gets right back up, similar to how Eli did all of his career. But hopefully this helps him continue doing that and makes him even more durable because he's even stronger and can take even harder hits potentially. I know he twisted his ankle last year and was out for a couple games, so I don't know if adding 9 pounds of muscle is going to help with anything like that, because that was kind of a freak thing. But hopefully the added weight just makes him more durable and gives him more sustainability against big defensive linemen clobbering him. But I don't really think that it's going to make a huge difference with ball security.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was going to say, I think it'll certainly help with like the QB sneaks and some some of the real contact plays. I don't necessarily have the insight onto what it's really going to translate to on the field. I think it's the fact that it was something that he wanted to do, he decided to do, he figured out how to do it, and he committed to do it, and he did it. I think that the process behind that is really encouraging. I think that's what you want in a quarterback. But I just want to go back to my optimism. I feel like I really do remember 2004 when Eli was in his rookie year, and as I'm sure you guys are aware, the Giants started 5-2 with Kurt Warner. They lost 2 games in a row to get to 5-4, and then they decided to kind of punt on the season and to put Eli in, and he lost his first 6 games, including the 2 that Warner lost for an 8-game losing streak. And just like Jones had the long losing streak too. I mean, there were a lot of question marks, but there were some great throws. There was a hit he took from Jerome McDougal that I'm sure seen. That was probably the biggest hit he's taken in his whole career. That he still
Chris
talks
Baker
about as his welcome to the NFL. Yeah, in 2016 week 3. And then I think McDougal hit Eli so hard that when his contract was done in Philly, the Giants signed him in camp because they're like, wow, maybe he can hit the other guys, and it was just like Barwin signing out of Philly, like he didn't do anything. But I've never been this excited about a young quarterback as I have been about Jones. And really in my life that means one of two. I mean, I kind of you can kind of add Danny Cannell to that mix, but I think Jones's ceiling is higher than Eli's ceiling, and I'm not convinced he's going to get there. But I'm just so excited by what this kid brings to the table. I think the idea that he won his teammates over the way he did, and I think it's too bad because it does. Dave Gettleman did say that Shermer was the one who first brought Jones to his attention. So I feel I do feel bad for Pat, but I'm just thrilled to have this guy on the team.
Absolutely. And thinking about those quarterback-oriented head coaches, Ben McAdoo identified Pat Mahomes, and then you have Pat Shermer identify Daniel Jones. Like, these guys know their quarterbacks, and clearly We passed on Mahomes, which just looks like a really bad mistake now, but we ended up with a guy in Jones that seems to have a lot of potential, and I really like what he has to bring to the table. Like you said, before, he's a cerebral player. A little bit different than what we were talking before, but he also is kind of has the intangibles that you look for in a franchise passer, and there can't be a coincidence that there hasn't been any issues on offense. The legal issues going on, defense related or special teams, the offense has been buttoned up. The wide receivers look good. They're having no struggles. At least Golden Tate had the suspension last year, but Daniel Jones is here now. I'm not really worried about any legal issues when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. Knock on wood again, but I think that he is a leader. He's a little bit more vocal than Eli, but he has a different type of athleticism. He has a higher ceiling because of that mobility. Now, Eli was made of jello because the guy would get absolutely rocked. Like, you remember that San Francisco game in 2011? That guy was destroyed, man. I've never seen a guy, and he doesn't look athletic, Eli. So you see him and you're like, he's an average Joe getting hit by like 300-pound defensive tackles and getting rocked by ripped linebackers at a Super Bowl level. And he's getting back up, and he's throwing a 30-yard pass on the dot to Victor Cruz the next play. And it's incredible to see a player that doesn't look that athletic continue to take physical hits by professional athletes, professional people in the NFL, and get back up and never miss a game due to injury. The only reason he missed a game is because Ben McAdoo had to screw everything up. And Geno Smith needed his opportunity to shine, right? Because Geno Smith was never going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. His time had passed. He was not there anymore. And Ben McAdoo really, I don't think we'll ever forget that, what he did there.
I'll never forget that. I'll always hate Ben McAdoo for that. That was like one of my lowest moments ever as a Giants fan, was that day. Eli is like a hero to me. And that San Francisco game that you mentioned is my favorite Eli Manning game. I enjoy watching that game for Eli more than I enjoy watching those Super Bowls. I think that was his best performance, where he really just put the team on his back, and he got hit time after time and just got up each and every single time and delivered each clutch throw that he needed to. That was really one of the most admirable Eli Manning moments and heroic moments of his career. But I also want to just tie into our last segment with this one. The way that Will was just describing Daniel Jones and all of that, and how we were discussing Daniel Jones, that Samuel Tarley comparison, just more and more I think about it, is so perfect that I just had to say that real quick.
I appreciate it.
And
I want to, get back to what you're saying. So, by the way, McAdoo in this Game of Thrones world would be the Mad King. And actually thinking about it a little more, if we are going to put somebody as Littlefinger, I think the answer has to be Kevin Abrams. At the beginning of the series, Littlefinger's the master of coin, and that's basically what Kevin Abrams' role is with the team. And a lot of people I'm a lot less excited about Kevin Abrams' job performance than what a lot of other people would say. I think I think he plunged the kingdom into debt, just like Littlefinger. I think, in the books, I think Littlefinger's doing that intentionally. And I think the showrunners, wrote off that plot line because they quit on the show, but that's neither here nor there. I think the 2016 free agency class was really inexcusable. Eli's last extension was really inexcusable. I think, the way that Eli went out at the end of 2017 with that Geno game, I think that was a mistake. But the bigger mistake was, the way that they tried to make it work again after the fact. And, when the signs were clearly there, wholesale changes should have meant, getting rid of the $23 million elephant in the room who's not playing over replacement level talent. So I think, I put more fault of the Eli fiasco in 2017 on Mara than on McAdoo. I think when he saw the way things were going, he said, okay, this will give me an excuse to fire Ben and Jerry. The fans will be behind me, as in, like, I'm the guy who's here to save the day, kind of like the way Viserys thought King's Landing would treat him when he arrived. And and I think he, to an extent, he was right. But I never drank the Kool-Aid for a second. I don't think they made the changes that they needed to make. I think they decided that Reese would be the scapegoat, but they still decided to win with the team that he built. And, it was just a very disjointed process. So I'm I'm less upset today than I was a couple years ago. I do think obviously if they had gone to Webb instead of Geno would have been a much healthier
I
transition.
agree.
But one of the things that really struck out to me about that, and I don't think this has been discussed enough, Eli had, people had said that they approached Eli and they said, "Hey, you're going to start, but then we're going to, if the game's out of hand, we're going to give somebody else a chance to, and he said, you know what, forget it, just have the other person play. I don't want the streak to keep going if it's not going to mean anything." And that meant a lot. But then 2 years later, they kept Eli on the team last year, right after they traded Odell and which, an Occam's razor for football reasons is, they're doing it for football reasons. If they're doing it for football reasons and keeping Eli on the team, I mean, that's literally keeping him on the team just for the streak's sake, for that 16, first Giant to be on the team for 16 years, which I think is more of an asterisk, giving Eli that record over Strahan, and there's another Giant who is tied, and I don't remember it off the top of my head.
Probably Zach Diassi.
No, Diassi was 07 to 19, so it wasn't quite 15 years. But I think it's a guy who's who was before my time. But I'm still really upset about that. I understand that you don't want to cut him, but having his record go down to 500, having him spend 12 years in his last season as a backup, it was not the note that you wanted him to. So it wasn't all pros on the pros and cons list for keeping him around. And I think as Gettleman said last year, part of the GM's job is to eliminate distractions, and I think he really failed at that job. And I think Daniel Jones, as much as he learned from Eli, I think he also had Tanny. Who is supposed to be this great locker room influence, but he also could have gotten more reps in camp, and that would have given him some learning experience too. So I don't think I think the biggest problem with with that Geno game is that it gave us these 2 years of an apology tour, and I think that really set the franchise back.
I'm going to agree with you about the last 2 years being an apology tour kind of thing, but I also want to counterpoint in a way. Would it have been more of a distraction having Eli or cutting Eli? Because there's a lot of fans that would have been severely outraged. And then, I forgot where I was going to go with my other point. But I do think that there would have been a lot of distractions surrounding the Giants had they cut Eli. The media would have made it, how do you just cut this franchise legend, let him go out on his own terms? So I think he was put, Dave Gettleman, I'm actually going to sympathize with him a little bit here, that he was put in a difficult situation there. Because when he took over this team, everyone was upset because of what they did to Eli in 2017. So he had to kind of, fix fan relations with the team and bring the support back and show support for Eli in order to win the fan base over. And then, of course, I think that just kind of led him down a rabbit hole where it did become an apology tour. But I think that if he were to have just came in and cut him, the Giants probably would have lost a lot of fans had that happened.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, they managed that entire situation extremely poorly, and half of it is because when Dave Gettleman joined the Giants, their entire mantra was not revolving around rebuilding. It was around winning with the team that Jerry Reese left behind, and that's why the transition from Eli Manning to Daniel Jones was so problematic, because Eli was still considered the franchise quarterback. He was still considered the guy that could get it done. And the offensive line was terrible. Then they realized, oh crap, we have to rebuild, and we can't do it with Eli Manning on the back half of his career, who just can't really get it done anymore without an amazing running game and fantastic offensive line with seconds in the pocket. He just can't. It's just not possible. So getting rid of him was always the goal. As tough as it is to say, they were trying to get rid of him, but you have to do it the right way. And Dave Gettleman inherited a situation that was almost impossible to get right. They were such a bad team last year. Getting him that final win against Miami was difficult, just to send him off. Like, they were trying to just win a game to get him out of there. That's why I think Daniel Jones' injury wasn't actually an injury. I don't think Daniel Jones was that injured. Those 2 games were for Eli's farewell. That in my opinion, that's how I feel about it.
So a few things. I think the idea that you fire McAdoo and Reese and you say we need wholesale changes, and then you start a GM search by looking at 3 people who basically were part of the last regime, and a token interview to Louis Riddick on ESPN, who from everyone I talked to wasn't really considered that seriously. That's part of a broken process. Then you look at what we're talking about in 2018. sorry, going into 2019, you spend 6 overall on a quarterback because you're trying to give it one last go around, but then you don't even let him compete for the starting job in training camp. So it's like, you're not even saying let the best man win. You're saying let the guy who's been around.
We're trying to replace.
Been around here win. Let's remember something else. In 2018, that Odell interview, he said that he didn't believe in the coaching. The coaching has been replaced. He didn't really have a comment on whether or not he believed in Eli Manning. Eli lasted 2 years into 2019. I mean, he was right. Gettleman said he wanted guys who hated to lose. Odell hated to lose so much. He said today he had mental health issues because he was so upset that the team, wasn't firing the way that it should be. I don't think Odell was all about himself. I think he wanted success, and not him success, everyone's success. So I don't have the I'm not as as empathetic about that. And what I don't understand how you can say we need wholesale changes, but then we're just going to replace the guy and keep doing everything exactly like the way we've been doing it. The only wholesale changes I'd seen really came after replacing Shermer with Judge and actually changing the way of maybe we shouldn't tell the media all of our plans. Maybe we should actually consider trading down in the draft. It's maybe we shouldn't decide to make every year a win now year and actually try to front load some contracts so that we can have a little more space, more space in the future.
Right.
There was a incredibly, it was a recipe for failure any way you cut it. There was not a sound plan, and I'm still upset about it. And I still think that Gettleman needs to be held accountable because it's you're at a point now, or you're at a point like towards the end of last year where you're trading for Leonard Williams to try to save your skin. Literally, you don't want to be 2-14, you want to be 4-12, so you're not quite as embarrassed. So so those same fans who don't want to turn on Eli will say, okay, at least they won a couple games, they finished strong. Sure, we'll give it another go around. It's just it's really I think it's a sign of it's a sign of a lack of character, even because the way that he put himself and his own reputation in front of the team. I'm talking about Gettleman, not Eli. So I'm I'm not convinced with the way that with what Anthony said about that fans wouldn't come back. The Colts cut Peyton. Obviously he had the neck injury and that was a little different. They had Andrew Luck waiting in the wings, but Peyton meant more to the Colts than Eli did to the Giants. Peyton was a significantly better player for the Colts. He was their guy. He was the best player on their team. Eli wasn't the best player on our team. Even in 2011 when he was lights out, I wouldn't necessarily put Eli.
I think Strahan was.
Well, 2011, which was
2007.
Yeah, 2007. Yeah, Strahan was at the top. Burris was at the top. There were a lot of guys. That other guys on that defensive line. Corey Webster, even when he was playing at the top of his game, but it wasn't. Eli didn't win games for the Giants the same way that Peyton did for the Colts. And I don't mean to sound ungrateful for what Eli did do. I think Eli's been a terrific part of my fanhood, but he's really overrated in-house, and I think he's really underrated out-of-house.
Yeah, I mean, he is a phenomenal player for his individual performances in extremely clutch moments. Consistency-wise, that's where the numbers start to get skewed because, okay, like if you look at his numbers overall averages, you're like, okay, they weren't that great, but he showed up in the biggest moments, which doesn't mean you're the best player, but just maybe the clutchest player. Michael Strahan was extremely consistent. Plaxico was consistent. They had some guys, like you said, Corey Webster, Aaron Ross even stepped up and they were good every game. Eli sometimes had to get picked up by a Matt Bradshaw or Brandon Jacobs, that last little inch of an arm that Brandon Jacobs put down that got that first down on 4th and 1. Those little plays
even
right there.
Asante Samuel, he picked him up too.
That's also
Asante
true.
Samuel.
So, it is what it is. But, that's a lot bigger of a conversation. To wrap up our Game of Thrones portion before we dive into Saquon Barkley's Madden rating, I want to ask, what do you think No Nuts Theon Greyjoy? Who do you think he correlates to?
Okay, real quickly, I want to say one last thing about Eli. With the distraction thing, I think going into the 2019 season, he was still on the team because had they cut him, it would have made it too obvious what they were doing in the draft, and it was drafting a quarterback. And then I think So they kept him around in order to keep sort of that smokescreen there, and then they drafted their quarterback. But then going into the season, he's still on the roster. You can't cut him after the draft. That would look bad. And then I think they just found themselves in a bad position where they were kind of forced to do something that Pat Shurmur clearly didn't want to do. I think he was ready to move on from Eli. But also, since we're going back into the Game of Thrones section, when I said Peter Dinklage, or I mean not Littlefinger earlier about myself, I have to add just a little more context to that. On our floor, we were in the middle of a severe prank war, and I think that's how I got that Peter Baelish comparison, because I was always buddy with everyone, because no one would ever prank me because I kind of tricked them and manipulated them not to prank me, but then I would end up pranking them. So I think that's kind of where it came from. I became quickly, because I only lived on that floor for the second semester. I was somewhere else in the first semester, but quickly I became a little bit sneaky and started winning this prank war. So I think that's where it came from. But with the Theon Greyjoy, I'm going to let Will take that, because I think he's going to come up with something way better than I could.
So I don't have a Theon Greyjoy specifically, and I do have a few more to get through. But I will say that the Greyjoy clan in general, the Lords of the Iron Islands, if you remember from the books, they basically, Balon Greyjoy is always trying to like rebel against the kingdom. He's always, he's always really upset. He likes to declare himself king of the Iron Islands every 10 years. He got both of his sons killed for, fighting against the system. So maybe the Greyjoy, House Greyjoy themselves is me right now, because I'm, obviously not very happy with the way the, kingdom's being run. So I don't know. What is dead, it may never die.
Yeah. But moving on to Saquon Barkley's Madden rating before we wrap up here. They just increased his rating from 89 to 91. That's a little bit better. So they just did that, probably because the Madden adjuster is a Dallas Cowboys fan. I think Anthony mentioned that. So that is a pretty biased. I kind of find that messed up, that the guy making the ratings is biased. Like, the Giants already suck in the game. Why give us a running back who deserves to be a little bit higher? A guy who now is like lower than Nick Chubb, who has one season under his belt. I don't know. I don't really get it. But what do you guys see there, and why do you think he should be higher or lower?
Well, I'll say with the ratings adjuster, the guy who makes the ratings, being a Cowboys fan, it should be a team of people making the ratings, because that would cancel out biases. But it's not just Giants fans who have these complaints. If you look at Redskins fans and Eagles fans, they also are like infuriated by their players being underrated by this Cowboys fan who's making the ratings. It's really strange that Madden just gives this one guy all the power over all the ratings. I mean, come on, you're not going to tell me there are 5 running backs in the NFL. Perfect. But you're not going to tell me that there's 5 running backs in the NFL who are better than Saquon Barkley. I don't know. Personally, I don't see it that way, at least in terms of pure talent. Maybe he sure hasn't reached his potential because he was injured last season. The offensive line has held him back, and the play calling has held him back. That's actually going to be my next film review, so stay tuned to that on the YouTube channel. But Saquon Barkley, ultra talented. There's not 5 players who are better than him. And then there's also Brandon Brooks of the Eagles is another great example. I know he's hurt now, but he was only a 93. I don't even think he was ranked as the best guard, but Eagles fans are very upset. Like, that dude is the best guard in football. He should be a higher rating. It's just Cowboys fan who's got this little monopoly over Madden ratings, and I don't get it. I'm not too worked up about it because I don't really care. It's Madden ratings. You can go in and adjust them yourself anyway, which is what I always end up doing. But I'm just not excited for Madden this year for like plenty of reasons. I don't think the game has been that good in recent years. They didn't do anything to update the franchise mode, which is my favorite, and it's been lacking lately. So all of that in turn has made me like pretty disappointed with Madden and not excited for this new game. But then when you just throw on these terrible Giants ratings on top of all of that, it just brings me down even more. It makes me even less excited. So that's kind of where I sit right now with Madden and their ratings.
I know who Saquon Barkley is.
Who is it?
He's Grey Worm.
Grey Worm.
He's Grey Worm. Because he just goes to battle and he dominates every time he does. That's it.
I would say he's Rhaegar Targaryen. I would say that he's Rhaegar because he as much as he's battling, I think he's also really into being loved. And I think that, that's part of why the Giants got him, because I think they said that even if it doesn't work out, in the back of their head, we have
He's
a guy
marketable.
who can be the face of our franchise that, fans will accept and basically shut up and take it. And which is part of the reasons why I'm so, viscerally, prone to bringing up, the blunder of selecting him in the first place, because I feel like, no, I'm not taking the bait. But, I hate when people, you see these tweets all the time, RT for Zeke or like for Barkley. It's like, people have different skill sets. I don't think there's anybody in the league who's more explosive than Barkley. I think, if you're trying to run out the clock at the end of the game, you want Derrick Henry over Barkley 10 times out of 10. I think, I think those two ideas are pretty hard to argue. Barkley is, like I said, the most explosive player in the game. He's also a very deficient blocker. And I think that I didn't see his pass blocking rating. I saw that they had, brought up a bunch of other attributes, and I wouldn't be surprised if that rating would weigh him down. And I think if that's the case, that's something that I frankly accept. Wayne Gallman would come in and he would be a significant upgrade in pass blocking. And I think, having Dion Lewis, who's done that fairly well, will be able to get Barkley on the field and line him up wide. And I think, that really can open things up. But I think it's a liability to have a passing play where you need Barkley blocking. And, guys like Aaron Jones, who people were upset that he was below Barkley, if depending on how much you're weighting these different attributes, there's a reasonable argument to say that, a team would be better off with a guy like Jones, who's got a higher floor on a given play, but a lower ceiling. So, I don't get really agitated about Madden. I kind of have stopped playing Madden. I was really bad at franchise mode because, it's funny because people be like, this isn't Madden, Well, I treated Madden like it was real football. So I'd be like, 15 in school and I'd build my franchise mode. So I'd get like, my left tackle in the first round, and then I'd get, a little edge rushing help or whatever. And I wouldn't get like a running back until I'd, get like a 70 or whatever. So, really, really trying to, play running backs don't matter in Madden, which doesn't quite work to the same extent. So, the one thing, and just back to the, what you're saying about the Cowboys fan, the least he could have done was make Dak Prescott the best QB in the game. Any evidence that we can have that Dak is really, the guy and, can get can push Jerry's hand into giving him that, that contract that he so deserves, let's make him do that.
Yeah, I would be all for giving him as much money as he wants.
So I do want to run through a couple more Game of Thrones parallels that I just had written down, if you guys will indulge me.
Sure, yeah.
Giants beat writer that I had is I put Art Stapleton as Sir Davos Seaworth. I think that they,
I like that.
They're both like really like clever and witty in that same kind of way. I think they understand what their job is and they do the job the best they can. I think that they take their ego out of the equation. And I think they're both good with kids. I think, Art, I've met Art personally, and I know, how much he, his nieces and nephews love him, how much his daughter loves him. And I think, obviously Davos has that, has that relationship with Lyanna Mormont and with Shireen Baratheon. So I really like that one. I think they both, also, I think the sense of humor is a really important one there. I will say, another one that I really liked, Robin Arryn, the whiny son of John Arryn, who is Lord of the Vale, who is still attached to his mother's breast. Eli Apple.
That's perfect.
I like that one.
That is really good.
Oh my God! Yeah, somebody wrote something mean about me. Well. Oh my God! So I think
his mom comes to the rescue.
Exactly.
Yeah, Apple. Yeah.
I think you get Robin Arryn, you're getting his mom too, and his mom's a little who else do I have? I have this one I think you'll like. I said Tristain Martell, if you remember him. So in season 2, there's a scene where Tyrion tells Pycelle, Varys, and Littlefinger all different places where he's going to send Myrcella to have her married to make a strategic alliance for the Lannisters. So he ends up sending Myrcella down to Dorne, and what is Dorne? And so to marry Tristan Martell. and
Yeah.
Dorn throws that into House Lannister. So that for me is Leonard Williams. You know, there's nothing about Tristane's character that really has any fans talking about him. You know, people talk about the fact that everybody hated him because of, you know, how he arrived on the scene. You know, and he ended up being murdered by, you know, spoiler alert, sorry, but he got, you know, murdered by his own house because, you know, things were out of order. So I found that to be you know, a kind of little idea. And then similarly, I said Jabril Peppers is Rosalind Frey, who was the bride of Edmure Tully, not at Robb Stark's wedding, but at Edmure Tully's wedding. People get that confused about towards the end of season 3. He kind of came over and he was like the throw in of that package. It's like, okay, fine, we get House Frey's support, great, but yeah, we get her too. I think, you know, that was really about you know, getting that first round pick. And also, okay, we'll have a couple years of Peppers to backfill the Collins position so we can get our books right and be able to build from there, potentially with Peppers, potentially without that. I thought that worked pretty well.
Dude, your knowledge of this show it's unbelievable. You're saying names and I'm like lost until you explain it.
So, you know, we talk about that Red Wedding, which but, you know, things started falling apart for Robb Stark even before the Red Wedding. You know, if you remember, he had to execute a member of one of his own bannermen, Lord Karstark. So in that case, I have Lord Karstark as DeAndre Baker because, you know, I think, you know, the most likely scenario that we see is that the team he who passes the sentence will swing the sword, and he will not necessarily be with the team much longer. And then lastly, I said Bronn, you know, Tyrion's like assassin for hire. I had Bronn as Landon Collins, who was you know, he was with everyone for a while, then he went to the highest bidder. So you know, he loves his gold, and obviously Cersei doesn't really like Bronn. Well, you know, the actress and the actor refused to be in the same scene because they had personal differences. Little fun fact.
Huh.
But so I think there are, you know, obviously everybody goes about it a very different way. You know, I made no secret that I think Stapleton and Duggan are really at the top of the game. They've been doing it for the longest.
They're great.
They're awesome.
Art has relationships with players that really nobody else has. The players will go to Art I didn't mean to, you know, make things a little heavier, but you know, I should come up with a Game of Thrones, you know, winter is coming or something, you know, like, you know.
There you go, though. You know, it's messy, but, you know, everyone's doing the best they can right now. It's tough. The atmosphere of life in the country, in the world, you know, we're all sifting through it in our own ways. But the reality is we're doing it together. You know, it's humanity at the end of the day. And, you know, I'm happy to include everyone, including yourself, Will, on the channel and really just talk about things. You know, have some fun with Game of Thrones, have some fun with the New York Giants. We're really in a dead period right now before training camp starts up. If it does start up on time, we don't even know yet. There's a lot to be said and a lot going to happen in the next few weeks. So for everyone tuning in and who have stayed through for the entire episode, thank you for listening and hearing all of our fun takes on Game of Thrones and the New York Giants. And we really thank you for sticking through these difficult times. But we're making it, man. Like, you know, at one inch at a time, we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. And we're going to remember these days as the tough ones. But if you can survive something like this, man, you can survive anything in my book. So I really appreciate, Will, you coming on and talking to us Game of Thrones and football today.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I, you know, always appreciate the chance to join. To the audience, you know, obviously there's not a lot going on, so thanks for you know, sticking with us. But you know, like they say in Game of Thrones, you know, a long summer means a very long winter, and right now we're, you know, with COVID, we're experiencing a long winter. And you know, as Giants fans, you know, with, you know, dysfunction for the better part of a decade, you know, we've experienced a really long winter. So, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention again how excited I am about Joe Judge. I really think that they do have the right guy in charge. And they just need to do what they can to make sure he has all the pieces he needs to you know, to be allowed to fail on his path to being successful, because there will be those failures. I mean, Belichick didn't, you know, start out as a winner from day one, but yeah, it's, you know, we all care about this team. You know, I'm you know, very concerned with, you know, a looming particular extension, but you know, there are brighter days ahead. And thanks again for having me on. Keep doing what you're doing, and looking forward to being back again soon.
Absolutely.
Yep. And I'll just say before we wrap up, thanks again for coming on, Will. I had a lot of fun. The Game of Thrones comparisons were highly entertaining for me. I'm definitely going to have a fun time editing this with clips of Game of Thrones characters and kills on the screen. Maybe nothing too graphic, though, but should be fun. Hope everybody viewing this enjoyed. Stay tuned for more awesome New York Giants content. Like I said, film review coming out Friday, I believe. And I think Jack's trying to get up another highlight video this week, so stay tuned for that as well. And we thank you all for your views through everything. And leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and we'll see you in the next one, guys.
All right, go Blue.